And now, ladies and gentlemen, would you make welcome, please, Hee-Haw's own, the Prime Minister of Humor, the Reverend Grady Nutt.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. I have kind of gotten to where this has become my own little special chapel in the woods, and I come here frequently for a little respite and all those kinds of things. This is an album which will feature primarily the stories that I have told on Hee-Haw over the last several years that are my favorites, and one or two of them stories that became favorites of other folks. There are a couple of them that more people have said to me, gosh, I like that story about, than any of the other stories I've told. Anyhow, there are 18 and a half comedy minutes on a Hee-Haw show, and put the stopwatch on it sometime. It's pretty well programmed and calculated and put together. And out of that 18 and a half minutes, I have gotten 2 minutes of that time all by myself, which is a bit unusual, which gives me a little more than a tithe of the time. I wanted them to give time to me sacrificially. And so they have given me an abundant amount of time, and trust me just to stand up and tell stories. I don't submit a script. I don't use cue cards. I don't plan stuff. I don't time stuff. I know what story I'm going to tell, but I have no earthly idea how it's going to come out till they say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And then I just punt and hit it. So they let me do that. And out of those kinds of stories, I have developed kind of a crazy touch with picking up things out of the church, and that's really where it comes for me. Some of you know that I am truly an ordained Baptist minister of the one and only true Baptist faith. And I've had this wonderful vision about heaven. I love visions because you can't argue with visions. Oral had one, 90 stories high. And then he had vision part B. As soon as he got that one, he left the desert and came back and started building, or at least raising money for it, and forgot to get the part about the beds and the x-rays. So he's trying to finish up. And but I love visions because you can't. And I also notice that you have different kinds of visions depending on what you ate for supper. That's really true. You have a really good Mexican food supper after 9 o'clock, and you too could write the book of Revelation. I mean, it'll do it. And I know somewhere on the Isle of Patmos, John found a Taco Tico. I just know there had to be one out there with a double jalapeno. But according to my vision, right inside the main gate of heaven when we all get there are going to be these enormous corrals, normally about 12 feet high, with boards that are 2 by 12 oak, barbed wire on the top leaning in. According to my vision, there are these enormous corrals for each denomination. There's this huge one for the Catholics, and one not quite so big, but we're working on it, for the Baptists. One about the same size for the Methodists, one about a fourth that size for Presbyterians. We're going to enlarge it a little since they decided to unite. And then we've got one back in the corner about that big for Lutherans, kind of a playpen in heaven. There's not a 4-foot fence. If they won't out, let them out. They'll get back in. Lutherans don't know any better. Church of Christ have a rubber fence because they hit it pretty hard. I mean, these people get their heads down. They're going into the fence, that's all. But according to my vision, all of us are going to be required to go in our corrals of our choice and spend 833,000 centuries in the Baptist corral till every last one of us is completely, totally, and forever and eternally over the shock of who else made it and who else didn't. My name really is Grady Nutt. Let me get this up front first. I did not ask for this name. I didn't want this name. Thought about changing this name. But I really hung with it because it's a good name. My name is Grady Lee Nutt. And I don't mind Grady Lee if it's printed, written. A headline in a newspaper, written on a return check from the government, IRS, a plaque from the Optimist for community service. Grady Lee Nutt is fine. Ordination certificate, wonderful. Reverend Grady Lee Nutt. I can handle that. Amen. The part that bothers me is when it comes out orally and people say, Grady Lee. My folks did that. They'd say, Grady Lee, and it would trip. And it sounded like you yodeling and tripped while you was doing it. Mother would especially do it. She'd go, Grady Lee, kind of like that, and always look like a chicken taking a drink. Grady Lee, she'd give you that shot. And I didn't enjoy that much. But it really is my name, Grady Lee Nutt. I really am an ordained Baptist minister. I get a lot of questions on Hee Haw. One, how is it possible that a man ordained to the one and only true Baptist gospel can be around all those women? And I say joyfully. It's okay, I've been ordained, I can handle this. I've dealt with it. But people ask me if the folks on the show are really like that. Yes, they really are like that. A couple of them you wouldn't want to make a long car trip with. But, I've had some great moments. Junior Samples and I were talking one day, sitting in two flat arm rockers, just sitting there doing nothing, slowly in the cane back. And Junior leaned over to me and he said, "You know, ain't no one person ever whooped me." Says, "Now 4 done it once." It would take a Sunday school class to whip him. I believe that. He is just tougher than nails. To me, he reminds me of a fire plug wearing overalls. He is just stocky, tough, mean, you know. And he's a wonderful guy. But people ask me, among other things, are you truly a minister? Yes. Are you a pastor? Well, I have been. I'm not now. I wouldn't do this to a church. You have to ricochet around and do your thing all over the country and speak and travel, and I don't think that's fair to a church. Even if I were out leading family life workshops and holding revivals and doing retreats and speaking on college campuses and changing the lives of today's youth, I don't think that's fair to do that when I'm pastor of a church. I think if I'm going to be pastor of a church, I ought to stay put, and I never could do that. In fact, the biggest battle in my life was how in the world can I have fun entertaining people, and that's so obviously what God has given me as my special gift and my most wonderful gift. It's what I like to do the most. Why would I have that if I was supposed to stay in Jamestown, North Dakota, see, or Nashville, Tennessee? Why? Well, this way I get to do all of that. I love to bounce around. I feel sometimes like a golf ball hit full swing in a tile bathroom. There's no, you know, I know how that would feel. Among the other things that I get asked questions a whole lot about is, do you think God has a sense of humor? Yes. If God did not have a sense of humor, there wouldn't be any Baptists. We all know that. Being a Baptist is kind of fun. I think if you're going to have to be one in heaven, why not start early? You know, learn the ropes and get moving. I knew very early in my life that God was going to call me into the ministry, and I guess I began to feel that drum beat about the time I was 12 or 13 years old. The hero of my life was Roy B. Flippo, F-L-I-P-P-O, Flippo. He actually licensed me to the Baptist ministry when I was 13 years old. I could legally perform weddings in the 8th grade. I never did do that, but I was very popular in high school. Roy Flippo was the great influence in my life. He first sparked in me a response to the ministry, and it was out of that I began to feel that welling up within me. I suppose that there was only one thing for me to do. Back when I was that age, there were only 2 things you could do in a Baptist church if you felt the hand of God on your life for some special purpose. Once you had become a Christian, once you had been baptized by full immersion, till you bubbled. There were only 2 things left that you could do with your life. Well, you could rededicate if you got bad off target. And you should. But other than that, there are only 2 special things you could give your life to: missions or to be a pastor. I always knew God would not call me into missions. I just knew that. God would not do that to me. See, God knows my heart. God understands my heart, and He is aware of the intense fear I have of snakes. Now, I heard missionaries come back from those foreign places like the Amazon and all of this, talking about snakes in the jungle. And I could just see them slithering through weeds and things and coming under the tent while you're preaching to these natives, and it wraps around your leg. And I just knew that God would not do that to me. See, I hate snakes. Worse than I hate anything on this planet, I hate snakes. I'd sleep in poison ivy before I would mess with a snake. I won't go in the zoo if the snake is awake. I will not look at National Geographic unless Eleanor goes through first and tears out the snake pages. I will not do this. And I always knew that I would. See, if you came at me with a snake, and you know, and like some of these churches handle snakes to prove faith, well, I'd be a heathen, I'll guarantee you. I mean, I go right on down there rather than handle snakes. If that's how you prove it, I don't want it. I'd rather drink Lysol. But if you came it with a snake in your hand, I would quit something I wasn't doing. I would give up an evil that I was not involved in. Well, a snake. See, if I had been Eve, you would still be perfect. A lot of things that have to do with the ministry are so special. Humor is a very real part of how we do our thing. Does God have a sense of humor? Yes, He does. And I think we have to keep that in mind. And ministers sometimes forget it. We have to live out a very holy, dignified, significant role among people. And speak with a mellifluous voice. Be ready in any crisis to bring comfort, strength, and assurance. And forget that we're normal. See, we learn this in the seminary. They give us a degree called a Bachelor or Master of Divinity. See, that's not my problem. Divinity I got in pretty good shape. Humanity is what's tearing me up. I need a master of humanity. And if I start remembering that, I begin to remember all those times that I'm terribly normal. Now, weird things can happen to you in the ministry anytime, anywhere, and they do. A lot of them we can't share with you lay people. See, I can't come up here on Sunday morning and say, I want to tell you the funniest thing happened at the funeral Thursday. You can't do that. Funerals are a serious time, need to be treated that way. But strange things happen at funerals. I have a pastor here in the state of Tennessee, and he will remain nameless, but this is an absolutely true story. I'm not inventing it. It's too funny reporting it. He was in his very first church over close to Knoxville, and he was pastor of a little congregation and was called on to do his first funeral about a month after he became a pastor. Well, you know, it's just right up there, and he's, what's he going to do? Real uptight about this. Went to see an older minister to speak with him about what he should do for the funeral service. And the older minister said, do you own a minister's manual? Now you can tell this fellow had been at it. This voice has been aged in oak. This, you know, do you own a minister's manual? And the younger minister friend said, well, no, he didn't. And the older minister said, buy yourself a minister's manual. It will tell you what you must do. Boy, this fellow had been called, you just didn't doubt it at all. He was in the right place. So the young minister goes out and buys a minister's manual. Now let me explain that real fast. Minister's manual has special ordered services for things like weddings, funerals, ordination of a deacon, ordination of a minister, dedication of a new church facility, commissioning of a missionary, and the scriptures and orders and all that stuff are in order. Then there are different kinds of funerals. An infant who died at birth, a military service, an elderly person who died at 104 after a long and fruitful life. So the funeral services are arranged differently depending on the circumstances of the death of the dearly departed. So in the midst of all of this, you have a minister's manual which clearly lays out various kinds of services for you. Different denominations like the Episcopal, Presbyterian groups have their very own minister's manual. Now some of us in the Baptist and the Nazarene and the Church of Christ groups might use one that's kind of general that's provided by the funeral home. See, and it'll have their name on the back near the family at the graveside there. So as you can see, First State Bank out here on the back. Now then, the minister takes his minister's manual, this young fellow that he buys at the Cokesbury bookstore or something like that, non-Baptist operation. They hadn't gotten out there yet. We're gaining on them. But he buys this minister's manual and goes into it, and here is a wonderful layout for a funeral service. He thinks it is just spectacular. Gives him scriptures and special arrangements and hymns to be sung and all this beautiful stuff. Wow, he just thought it was terrific. So he works up his funeral service and got it all in shape. Then goes out to do the funeral. The people were amazed at what a wonderful minister they had. How tasteful, how thoughtful, how significant this service was. Well, he just gave them his most wonderful thoughts. Then they drive out to the cemetery, and it's time for the committal service, when we commit the dearly departed to the earth forever. So they get out of the funeral car, slams the door, and opens his little minister's manual to the committal service portion of the funeral. It's a second ribbon. These deals have 2 ribbons in them. And opens it to the second ribbon, and he reads here, the minister may wish to gather a handful of soil and walk before the pallbearers to the burial site, scattering the dirt abroad and reciting the following verses. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, from the earth we come, to the earth we return. Well, he says, that's terrific. So he gets him a big handful of dirt, and it's running out between his class ring and his little finger. And he looks back at the pallbearers who are, as we say in eastern Kentucky, studying him right smart. And these are kind of typical Route 2 good farm folks. All these good men, brown from the eyebrows down, white from the eyebrows up. They wear their caps in the sunshine. And here they are holding the casket of the dearly departed with both hands, each of them, ready to walk toward the gravesite. And the minister looks back at them with a handful of dirt. And he says, "Y'all ready?" Now they're thinking to themselves, "Preacher, this isn't a bring your own dirt funeral." And one of them sort of shrugged like, "I guess so," and he just pivots with authority, starts walking to the little funeral home tent up on the hill, scattering the dirt, and they're walking behind him like they're following a diesel up a slow grade, just coughing and hacking as the dirt flies back through the air, and boy, he is just giving it to them. Ashes to ashes, dust to dirt. They're coughing and clearing out of there. From the earth we come, to the earth we return. Boom, walked right in the hole. True story, true story. Oh. There's a minister in Waco, Texas several years ago. I won't give you his name because I don't want to embarrass him on this album. But he's what you call a rather enthusiastic kind of preacher. Methodists aren't accustomed to this. They rarely ever get enough preaching to sweat through. You know, just kind of hang in there and be sociable, wear organdy gloves, and things like that. And this preacher was one of these kind of guys who was kind of a showman, and on Sunday nights he got real loose, and he'd come down out of the pulpit and preach in the aisles to people, just carry on. And I remember one Sunday night he got out in the aisle and he was just letting somebody have it, and he says in this 2 Peter 3:2 says, and he went blank, couldn't remember the verse. 2 Peter 3:2, I remind you. And he couldn't think, so he runs back down the aisle, up on the steps, opens the Bible, whiplashes through the pages, finds it, goes, runs back down there, and then finishes the quotation. Now, that's the way he was. Well, I went to Baylor University in Waco, and the students used to just turn out in droves to go down there on Sunday night because this guy would just turn the place into kind of a wild circus. And you never knew what would happen next, but it was kind of crazy. One Sunday night, just before the evening service, a lady came back to his study who was one of his members. And she called him by name, and she said, "My brother is here from Ohio, and he's pastor of church there. And I just thought perhaps you might like to know that he's in the service." And the pastor, with a marvelous, booming, go-get-em kind of voice, said, "Wonderful." Said, I think I should call on him for prayer this evening, but he'd be willing to do that. Well, yes, he'd be pleased to, I'm sure. He said, "Good." So he gets the fellow's name down, and in the service comes out, and he says, "We're so pleased tonight to have worshiping with us from Ohio, Brother such and such." Call the man by name, and he says, "At this time, I'd like to ask him to lead us to the throne of grace in a word of prayer." Bowed his head. Well, unbeknownst to this pastor, the visiting preacher was a Pentecostal holiness in high gear type. And the minute he was called on for prayer, he grabbed the pew in front of him and half launched himself in prayer. "Oh, God, we thank you," and just off and running. Well, the church was used to the pastor being kind of an unusual type, but they weren't used to this enthusiasm. And I mean, he was off and running. "Oh, God, one of these mornings we're going to wake up and look outside and it's going to be darkness." Well, the pastor sort of, caught fire with this old boy, and he says, "Oh, yes." And the fellow says, "We're going to call Hong Kong, China. They're going to say it's dark over here." The preacher says, "Oh, God, help us. We're going to call Honolulu. They're going to say it's dark over here." Preacher says, "Oh, God, help us. We're going to call San Francisco, and they're going to say it's dark over here." He said, "Oh, God, help us. We're going to call Washington, D.C. They're going to say it's dark over here." So, "Oh, God, what a phone bill." true. I talked about ministers in various kinds of places. We have Presbyterian ministers and Catholic priests and Jewish rabbis and all kinds of people. Frequently in a city like Nashville, Louisville, Dallas, Memphis, Atlanta, all these major southern cities around the world and some up north, we're not sure. They don't send a lot of news south. We do hear that they observe Christmas occasionally up there, but that's about all we know. But one of the things that happens in many cities is the ministers have what we call a ministers' association, where we get together and act nice to each other 2 days a year. And they'll have wonderful programs, and they'll have somebody come in and lecture on some esoteric subject and speak wonderful, warm, thoughtful words and things like this. And everybody claps when it's over. We think it's wonderful. One of the things that ministers do together, which I think is fun in a lot of places, they have a ministers' association annual Christmas banquet. All get together and celebrate the season, bring our spouses, and all get together and just have a wonderful, warm time. Joy to the world. We sing and we have wonderful prayers and good thoughts, and it's just a fun time. And they'll put the Church of Christ people at the table with the Baptists, and they'll just smile at each other and know each other's wrong, but they try to tolerate it for 2 hours. And Methodists can get along with anybody, so they put them with the Catholics and the Jewish folks, and all over, just trying to be nice to each other. One such banquet was being held years ago in a fun town, and they're all in here, all celebrating Christmas. Came time for the dessert, and the ushers came in, the waiters came in and brought the dessert. Now, in an adjoining dining room, we had a meeting of the local Kiwanis Club or whatever, one of the local service clubs, and their Christmas banquet was in process, and when it came time for dessert, the waiters by mistake got the dessert switched. And they took the chocolate ice cream and cake that was supposed to go to the ministers to the service club. They took the spiked watermelon that was supposed to go to the service club to the ministers. About halfway through the dessert, the head waiter realized what had happened. His eyes popped out just like, oh no. Rushes over and parts the door about 2 or 3 inches, and he's staring in, and the other waiters are congregated around him saying, what's happening, what's happening? He said, well, the Catholic priest is trying to get seconds. Said the Episcopalian rector is gnawing on the rind. Jewish rabbi is eating his neighbors. The Baptist preacher is collecting seeds. Different kinds of religious groups get wonderful reputations, and some of it is stereotyped. Baptists are supposed to be hellfire and brimstone, all that kind of stuff. And the Methodists are supposed to be kind of laid back and cool, and the Catholics are supposed to swing a lot of incense. We have just, typical stereotypes of each other. Our Quaker friends are called the Friends, and they worship in silence. Now, Baptists know nothing about that. There has not been an acknowledged silence in a Baptist church since the 1st century. The minute it gets quiet, somebody will leap back on the organ bench and start playing until somebody finds their bulletin. We just don't trust silence. Well, our Quaker friends worship in silence, and they have a very different kind of touch. And one of their characteristics that we know about is they're pacifists. They do not believe in violence, and they believe that the way you take the stinger out of war is not to retaliate. There was a wonderful Quaker family that had a grocery store in a little community, and 2 guys decided one night they're going to rob it. And so we got the brains of the group driving the getaway car, and he sends his helper, sort of a Woody Woodpecker variety, into the store to rob the safe. Now, the Quaker family lived in the back of the store. And so the guy that's driving the car says to his dumb accomplice, now all you got to do is go in, break open the safe, and just get the money and come out. And he says, but what if they find me? He said, you got nothing to worry about. These people are Quakers. They don't believe in violence. They're pacifists. They will not harm you. They'll try to talk you out of it, but they will not lay a hand on you. Sure, I'm certain. They're Quakers. Okay. So the guy goes in, breaks the lock, ting, 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 gets inside, ting, 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 ting. He's back in the clank working on the safe. About 4 minutes later, he comes barreling out that front door, leaps in the car, get out of here! He said, where's the money? Go! Wow! And then they roared down the street, man, what are you doing? Get out of here! Where is the money? I didn't get the money. Why not? He said, I got the safe open, and I was raking money in a sack, And I looked up, and there was this fella with a goatee and a nightshirt and a shotgun. And he pointed it right at me. And he said, "Sir, I would not harm thee, but thou standest where I am about to shoot." One thing that Baptists are noted for is evangelism. We go out and take it to you. Come after you. We want you in. And we do things called visitation. We go out and hunt up prospects, knock on doors, invite you to join our church and become part of our group. We do that. In the rural areas, it's a little more difficult, for the farms are spread out, you know. And if you're going to go visiting, you got to plan one road a week and sort of camp in transit till you get it done. The eastern Kentucky mountains, it's even tougher than that. You kind of go up a few houses at a time, pack a lunch, and go back later. Wonderful thing happened several years ago. Fellow's out, pastor of a church, and he's visiting farm to farm, getting acquainted with the folks. And he comes up to this mountain shack over in eastern Kentucky up above Hazard. And anything past Hazard is above Hazard. In fact, it's hazardous over there. And this fellow's up visiting in the community, going through all the trying to meet the farm folks and all this, back up in the hollers, as we say. Came to a fellow sitting out on his porch, had his arms folded, leaned back in his chair against the wall, a couple of sleeping dogs that didn't even bark when he stopped. Things peaceful and quiet, birds just kind of humming. They weren't even chirping, just an easy afternoon. Comes up to the old fellow sitting on the porch, and the Reverend speaks to him. "Howdy do, sir?" He says, "Yeah." Said, "My name is Reverend Johnson. I'm from down here at the Siloam Baptist Church." "Pleased to meet you, Reverend." "What is your name?" "Name's Hawkins." "Mr. Hawkins, good to meet you." "Sir, are you a Christian?" Said, "No, I told you I'm a Hawkins. Christians live 2 farms up on the left." He said, No, that's not what I mean." Said, "Are you lost?" "Oh, no, I've lived here 54 years. No. What I mean is, are you ready for the judgment day?" Hawkins says, "Well, when's that going to be?" He said, "Well, I don't know. It could be day of tomorrow. It could be the next day." He said, "Lord, don't tell my wife. She won't go both times." I'll tell you my favorite story, the funniest thing that's ever happened in my life. This is probably the single fiercest funny moment I've ever known. My freshman year in college, I attended Wayland Baptist College, one of our fine Baptist schools in Plainview, Texas, the most appropriately named town in the world. Plainview, Texas. Any way you look, out of it or into it, it's a plain view. West Texas, as many of you know, is the world's headquarters of nothing. Flat, desolate. In fact, you can stand in the middle of it and see the rest of it. It's an incredible place. People out there love their nothing, though. They build fences around their nothing. They're going to keep your something off their nothing. They will do this. I'll tell you my favorite story, the funniest thing that's ever happened in my life. This is probably the single fiercest funny moment I've ever known. My freshman year in college, I attended Wayland Baptist College, one of our fine Baptist schools in Plainview, Texas, the most appropriately named town in the world. Plainview, Texas. Any way you look, out of it or into it, it's a plain view. West Texas, as many of you know, is the world's headquarters of nothing. Flat, desolate. In fact, you can stand in the middle of it and see the rest of it. It's an incredible place. People out there love their nothing, though. They build fences around their nothing. They're going to keep your something off their nothing. They will do this. My freshman year in college, I went with my best friend from home, Elmore Averett. Elmore and I were in a quartet with 2 other fellows, Jim Hart and Ed Clark. Ed Clark was from Dallas. When you went from Plainview across to Dallas, you drove about 350 miles across the northern part of West Texas. From there, it was another 130 miles to my home, Jacksonville, which is over in the southeastern part of that area. And it's in what we call the deep East Texas area, the Piney Woods, 90 miles due west of Shreveport. We were going to ride, Elmore and I were going to ride with Ed Clark in his 1950 Plymouth convertible, burgundy with a white top, across West Texas to Dallas. My mother and Dad were going to drive up and meet Elmore and me in Dallas and take us back to Jacksonville. A week later, Ed was going to come through Jacksonville and pick Elmore and me up, and we're going to go spend the weekend together down in Galveston, Texas, and get a little sun and rest up and then go to work for the summer. So we piled the car full in Ed's convertible, and we're going to head across West Texas, go home for the summer. As we got to getting ready for the trip, it began to dawn on us that as we got on the road tomorrow, we could fix the back seat of Ed's convertible in such a way, with boxes and books and duffel bags and pillows and suitcases and all that kind of stuff. And when we put the top back mid-morning, we could actually get up on the back of his convertible and sunbathe and get ourselves ready for the trip to Galveston. Typical freshman logic. So we did that. Packed the back seat full, put a couple of army blankets over it, and made us a smooth place, up level with the top of the seats, the bottom of the windows. Well, we get ready and tear off across West Texas. We got out past Matador and all those places, and we're heading toward North Vernon and blazing on down toward Wichita Falls and heading into Dallas. About 10:30, the temperature was already 90 to 92 degrees. Hot, muggy, no air conditioning in Ed's convertible, of course. And so about 10:30, I said, Ed, why don't we put the top back and let's get some sun? Ed says, great. So we pulled off the side road and put the top back. Well, I decided I'd go first. So I got up on the back of the convertible, took off my shirt, and started to sunbathe. I don't know how many of you have ever sunbathed at about 65 miles an hour. You begin to have sympathy with anything that was ever cooked on a rotisserie. You don't need copper tone, you use barbecue sauce. And I'm telling you, it was so hot, so fiercely wind whipped. It was just something, lots of problems. One was that all the heat was just bearing down. Second, in a convertible, your hair always feels like it needs an oil change. Whiplashing and zinging you in the face. Third, other cars would pass us going the opposite direction, doing approximately the same speed. They're doing, say, a 65, we're doing 65. They kick up a little piece of gravel, a chip of glass, chunk of debris. Now, I can tell you one thing, that kind of stuff loves nothing more than the exposed portion of somebody's body. It will hunt it and find it, just like a homing pigeon. Bing, you got it. And you're going 65, he's going 65, and you have just been smitten with a 130-mile-an-hour piece of debris. And it'll put a hickey on you. I mean, you just get a bruise. And that's hard to explain to you folks. What happened to you? Well, this 130-mile-an-hour debris hit me. Sure it did, John. So that was the problem. The fourth problem, and I guess one of the worst parts of it for me, I had on a pair of Levi's that had not been washed since September, and this is late May. In fact, you leaned them up against something when you took them off. And I've got my knees doubled up because you don't want to hang your heels in the wheel as you're cruising down the highway. So I'm doubled up on the car trying to get some sun, and the back of my knees are in an absolute rash. Sweat is running in my sweat socks and in my wallet. It's just down my calf and thighs. I'm dying, sweating, miserably, miserably hot. 45 minutes was all I could enjoy of that. I decided it was time for me to get down, and Elmore decided it was time for him to get up. My best friend, Elmore Averett. Elmore was 6 feet and a half inch tall, weighed 132 pounds. Played football in my high school for the B team. Defensive left end, should have been a yard marker. He'd walk through the locker room just wearing nothing but sweat socks, and he looked like a Q-tip bent in the middle. That was Elmore. With a helmet, he looked like a chapstick. Number was 11. When he ran, he had a 1 under each arm. This is Elmore. Sandy auburn, red hair, freckles, hollow cheeks, 132 pounds. 4 pounds of that was Adam's apple. Elmore actually had to wear V-neck dress shirts. It was just terrible. Now, Elmore had dressed up so we could see his girlfriend who was at North Texas State. And as we were going across, we were going to deviate on the trip a little and run by so he could have lunch with her. So he had worn a good-looking pair of creased, pleated front, wide belt loop, skinny bottom breeches. Good-looking dress pants, had on a nice sports shirt, 4 times rolled up on the sleeves. That used to look good. No cat faces in the collar. And Elmore took his shirt off, folded it neatly, and laid it in the seat, stretched out on the convertible to sunbathe, and started having all the problems I had had. Intense heat, ricocheting debris, hair whiplashing, rash in the back of the knees, sweat in the sweat socks. Well, Elmore took about 10 minutes of that and realized that his good pants are going to be messed up by the time we get up to have lunch. So Elmore decided if he's going to sunbathe, he's got to change pants. So he gets up on his knees on the back of the convertible. Now remember, everything piled up in the back seat has you right up level with the tops of the seat. And he gets up on his knees, and there he is in clear sight, blazing across West Texas. Hitchhikers would hide behind litter barrels. I mean, they were just terrified. So Elmore gets up on his knees and shoves me forward. Now, convertible, just 2 doors. You shove the seat forward, and I'm hanging on the windshield. The wind is just blowing my head off. And I'm hanging on up here. Elmore's holding the seat up with the front of his head and rooting around down here looking for a duffel bag or something where he can find some old khakis, Levi's, or something he could put on to save his good dress pants. Ed was driving the car, about 6'2", 250, healthy fella. And Ed had already taken his shirt off. Now, he had his hair done like a lot of folks did in that day with excess of Vaseline hair oil. He used the wide teeth on the left end of the comb straight back. He could actually turn loose and steer the car with the grooves in his hair. It was not blowing, but Ed also had the hairiest shoulders I have ever seen. And blazing down the highway, here he was with his shoulders blowing in the wind and his hair locked in place. He was wearing mirror sunglasses he could see out and you couldn't see in. Kind of like a fancy suburban church. You couldn't, and he's got his left arm out the window and back through that little vent, and he's steering on the inside of the wheel with this arm up on the seat. Elmore is up on the back, and he looked like a gopher hunting roots, digging and searching and squirreling around. I'm up here hanging on the windshield. Ed's over here blowing the shoulders in the wind. While I was hanging on the windshield, I discovered in the floorboard a box at Elmore's feet, which had in it a number of trinkets from his desk. A teakwood elephant from India, which a missionary had brought his mother, and she gave it to Elmore to take to college. Little things like that. Among those things was the lampshade off of Elmore's desk lamp. The sun was killing my eyes. So I took the lampshade and forced it down on my head. And if you had been hitchhiking, you would have hid behind a litter barrel. It looked like a bunch of Shriners that lost the caravan. I mean, barreling. And I've got this thing look like my tassel blew off. I'm wearing a lampshade. Ed's driving with his hairy shoulders blowing. Elmore's up on the back hunting something to wear. Down in a duffel bag, Elmore turned up a swimsuit. Aha! Pulled it out, pulled the seat back. I caved in. There I sat in my lampshade. Ed was driving with his hairy shoulders and mirror sunglasses. And Elmore got up on his knees and started checking the horizon. And I looked around and said, Elmore, what are you doing? He said, I'm going to take these pants off and put this swimsuit on. I hit Ed on the shoulder. I said, Ed, stop. Elmore wants to change. No, go on, man. Don't stop. Get there. I said, Elmore, you're out in plain sight. He said, nobody's out there. He's right. It's West Texas. If you saw something coming, you had time to knit something before it got there. As far as you could see, there wasn't anything to look at. So, Elmore's checking, and so I started checking with him. So I said, it's time. So Ed turned the rearview mirror so he could watch. I turned it at a 45-degree angle so I could watch. I might want to share this with somebody. And when I realized there wasn't anybody behind us and he realized there wasn't anybody in front of us, I said, hit it! So Elmore unbuckled his belt and shinnied out of those good dress pants, folded them quickly, laid them in the seat, and grabbed up the swimsuit and stuck his foot in, and then discovered a serious problem. It was a jockey swimsuit, and he was wearing boxer shorts. No matter how hard he tried to tuck them in, they'd blow back out. He looked like he parachuted in on the back of this car. Flapping down the road, here we came. 6 feet and a half inch, 132 pounds with jockey shorts, boxer shorts blowing in the wind. I was just dying laughing. Well, I looked back and Elmore shinnies back out of the swimsuit and started checking the horizon. I said, now what are you doing? So I'm going to take this underwear off, and then I'm going to put this swimsuit on. I said, Ed, stop. Elmore said, go on. Nobody's out there. So he got back up on his knees, and Ed was just concentrating as hard as he could. I checked with him. Nobody was out there. I said, hit it. I turned at a 60-degree angle. Ed put the night dimmer on his mirror. You could hear Elmore giggling at himself. You know. And I'm watching, boy, and he gets his thumbs in the waistband, gave it one more look. And here he came out of that underwear, threw it in the floorboard. There he is. And his wrist, there he is. And his class ring and wristwatch. That's it. And Elmore grabbed up the swimsuit and stuck one foot in it. We topped a hill and went right through Henrietta, Texas. Just down through town. There is no bypass. You go right through Henrietta, Texas. And the minute I saw what was happening, I hit Ed, and he looked back and just died laughing. And slowed down to 20. And got on the horn. There's nowhere for Elmore to hide. He is up level with the seat in plain view of the whole world. I'm wearing the lampshade. I stood up behind the windshield and started greeting everybody in Henrietta. Wonderful to be in your city today. And I looked back, and Elmore was up on his hands and knees with his face hidden, with his bare back end shining to the stars. Ed circled the square twice. I looked back and felt sorry for Elmore. Took the lampshade and put it on him. Stood at attention with my hand on my heart, and we drove out of town. They didn't make an arrest because nobody could make a positive identification. Found a beautiful quotation in the hills of eastern Tennessee in 1964, and it hangs in my den at home. And it's a thought I'll leave you with tonight, and it's really kind of the drumbeat of my soul. Carved in barnwood by some mountaineer. I have no idea who thought it up. It just says old saying. But it's a beautiful saying, and in fact, if they ever open the Bible up again for nominations, I'm going to try to get this into Proverbs. It's a beautiful thought. And it's one I leave with you because I think it's really where we all need to come out when we think about the joy of our souls. And this is the quotation. Laughter is the hand of God on the shoulder of a troubled world. Troubled world. Troubled world. Troubled world.
Grady Nutt had a special gift. His joy was sharing joy. He loved to hear laughter. He loved to touch people's lives with laughter and with love. You'd never find anyone with a bigger heart for his fellow man than Grady. Grady loved everyone, and everyone whose life was touched by this special human being never walked away without a smile. Grady said that laughter is the hand of God on the shoulder of a troubled world. So, Grady, we say to you, thanks for the joy, thanks for the love, but most of all, thanks for the laughter.